This is about to get very real. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and whatever time of day it is. Hi, how you going? It's me. I have to say this up front before we start a conversation about anything, and that is that this video could be triggering to some people. I do discuss a lot of triggering things, and this is going to be possibly even a little triggering for me, but I want to be as real as possible with you, talking about my mental health journey. So if you're in a sensitive place right now, probably don't watch this because we do talk about I'm going to talk about some very sensitive subjects. If you are triggered at all or upset by this video, or if you have mental health problems in general and you don't know how to approach help, I'm going to leave some links to a few websites, namely Lifeline and Beyond Blue. They are fantastic websites. They also have a phone line that you can call at any time, and I believe they have chat on the website as well, so you can talk to someone over the computer. If you are more looking for just support through your journey, I definitely suggest the app Life, L-Y-F. You can go on there and you can remain anonymous or share your name, and you can just go on and post. It's kind of like Facebook, where you post like statuses and updates, and your supporters follow your journey. I think they call them beats now, and talk to you and support you, and let you know that you're not alone. If you need help or you're looking for guidance, I will leave links in the description. I wanted to start this conversation with a few mentions because my mental health journey has not just been about my disorder. I've had several other struggles along the years. Through high school and into college, I suffered with self-esteem and body image problems, and I had anorexia for quite a while. I self-harmed. I went through a very rough time in grade 10. It was probably one of the worst years of my life, and I self-harmed during all the anorexia and everything. I lost someone very close to me, and that really was the tipping point for me. I suffered through depression during that time as well. And then moving further into my life, I've discovered that I do get anxiety from time to time. And when my disorder cropped up, I started getting panic attacks as well. So I've had a bit of a mental health journey, just to touch base before we lead into my actual disorder story. So, as you can probably tell by the thumbnail, the name of my disorder is Depersonalisation and Derealisation disorder. I went on to a website and found a proper description of it and a full list of symptoms. The reason I did this is I want people to understand the disorder as a whole, whereas if I just tell my side of a story, it could be different to anyone else suffering from DPDR, because not everyone has all the symptoms and not everyone suffers it the same way or goes through episodes the same way. So, got some notes. So, the definition is Depersonalisation and Derealisation disorder, DPDR, is a type of dissociative disorder that consists of persistent or recurrent feelings of being detached or dissociated from one's body or mental processes, usually with a feeling of being an outside observer of one's life, depersonalisation, or of being detached from one's surroundings, derealisation. This disorder is often triggered by severe stress. So there are two aspects to the disorder. There's the depersonalisation and the derealisation, and some people get one or the other, Some people get both. I get both. I'm very, very lucky I get both. Generally speaking, the disorder is caused by severe stresses that have happened in your life. So there's a list here, for example, emotional abuse or neglect during childhood, physical abuse, witnessing domestic violence, having a severely impaired or mentally ill parent, and having a family member or close friend die unexpectedly. For me, I was emotionally and verbally abused during my childhood, and I lost a close friend unexpectedly when I was about 16. So I've got a couple of facts about the disorder. So only about 2% of people ever meet the criteria for having DPDR. It occurs equally in men and women. Cool, equality. And the average age at onset is 16, with only 5% of cases starting after age 25 and rarely beginning after age 40. One part of my story is that I first had my real bad episode when I was about 20. But as far as like symptoms and having just general derealisation and depersonalisation, I've had it since I was about 14. 14 was the first time I could really remember, you know, having any of those sorts of symptoms. And once the disorder was explained to me and I look back on my life, I was like, oh my gosh, I've actually been struggling with this a lot longer than I thought I had. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was probably the linchpin in a lot of my other mental health problems that I went through during high school and college. So, okay, so symptoms for DPDR are usually episodic, so they can, you know, go up and down in intensity depending on how stressed you are, what's going on around you. Episodes can last for hours or can last for weeks, months, or sometimes years. I personally have only really had hours or weeks. I went through a loss in the family around this time last year, and I had a lot of derealisation for several days straight. I think it was about 2 weeks. And it made it very difficult to mourn the loss of that person. So episodes can be triggered by different types of stress, depression, anxiety, or use of illicit drugs. As far as illicit drugs, I don't do any. I don't smoke. I don't really drink either. I'm a very boring person. But as I've mentioned before, I have suffered with depression and anxiety, and looking back in my life, I think that, you know, they were interconnected with my disorder in a way. And stress, well, I've had a lot of stressful things happen in my life, so yeah, that would be a definite cause. Anxiety and depression are common in people with DPDR, so they sort of go hand in hand in a very dangerous way, where like you're more likely to have anxiety and depression with the disorder, but they also can cause episodes with the disorder. Yeah. Some people fear that they have irreversible brain damage or that they're going crazy. I've definitely had days where I felt like I'm going crazy, but not in a very long time. Others obsess about whether they really exist or repeatedly check to determine whether their perceptions are real. I've never had that. I've never really felt the need to. I don't know how else to explain that. However, they always retain the knowledge that their unreal experiences are not real, but rather are just the way that they feel. That is very much me. I have very rarely had moments where I've been suffering from symptoms of my disorder and having, you know, bouts of derealisation, depersonalisation, even like precursors to episodes. I realise what's going on. I understand that what's happening and what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling is not real. And in a way, it helps. It makes sense to me where I'm just like, oh, this isn't real, I don't really need to stress or worry about it, and that sort of takes away some of the stress behind a lot of the symptoms. Speaking of symptoms, we're going to do them in 2 categories, so the derealisation and the depersonalisation. We'll start with the depersonalisation, so the DP part. Symptoms include feeling detached from your body, mind, feelings and or sensations. I've felt detached from my feelings quite a lot. I get just emotionless, which I hate, absolutely hate. It's very frustrating to have no emotional connection to anything in any way, and it's a very odd feeling. I've sort of felt detached from myself in a way where I've looked in the mirror and not realised it's me and not felt a connection with the reflection I'm seeing. But yeah, apart from that, yeah, I get that one. Feeling like an outside observer of your life. So some people say that they see themselves, like astral projection kind of thing. Feeling unreal or like a robot, having no control over what you say or do. I've definitely felt unreal, like my body's not real. I've had several moments, dangerous moments. I think I had one where I was extremely tired and my body didn't feel real because obviously my body was under stress because I was extremely tired, and my brain thought, oh, wouldn't that be cool if you just cut your hand to see if you could feel anything. I didn't, but yeah, that can lead to dangerous thoughts. So I've had the feeling unreal before. Feeling emotionally, physically numb or detached with little emotion. As I said before, I've had days in a row actually where I've had no emotion and just complete emotional detachment from everything, and I've hated it. Some cannot recognize or describe their emotions. Never had that, but I found that very interesting. Feeling disconnected from memories or being unable to remember them clearly. I have had that where I've gone, oh, was that real? Like, I remember doing this thing, and then I mention it to someone and they're like, I don't remember you doing that. Like, or I have false memories from episodes, and yeah, so sometimes I'm sort of like detached from my memories and I don't know how to, you know, if they were real or not, or if my mind's making them up. So I've had that sometimes. Okay, so onto the derealisation symptoms, so DR. Feeling detached from your surroundings, people, objects, surroundings, and sometimes everything can seem unreal. I have had this. This is probably one of the most common things that I go through, because I go through derealisation a lot more than depersonalisation. Very rarely do I think people are not real. Sometimes it's just sort of like, oh, I don't know who that person is, or you know, if it's people I don't know, I'll sometimes think, oh, they're not real. But people I know, yeah, they're real to me. Objects and surroundings. I've had tree lines, so like a bunch of trees, several houses, lampposts, a car. I've had several things where I was like, that's not real. That's like painted on a wall or a poster that looks 2D, two-dimensional. So I've definitely had that. It's very common for me to look at my surroundings and go, yeah, none of this looks real. It just looks sort of like 2D or glossed over like in a magazine, if that makes sense. Feeling as if you are in a dream, everything is foggy or has a glass wall or veil separates you from your surroundings. So that's sort of connected with what I was talking about before, where you, like, nothing really feels real and it just sort of looks all odd and doesn't look right and doesn't feel right. So I definitely have that. A lot of the time I'll have that feeling like I'm in a dream, and I sort of just I get distracted when I'm in those sort of head frames, because I'll think nothing's real and then I'll just sort of wander around and try and wrap my head around, what am I doing? This doesn't feel right. And I wander around the house and it leads to a lot of procrastination, and I don't like procrastination. But the world seems lifeless, colourless or artificial. Again, same thing. I've had that feeling of the artificial, where like everything seems fake and glossed over and like a picture. Subjective distortion. Objects may appear blurry or unusually clear, or seem flat or smaller or larger than they are. Specifically, seems flat happens a lot for me. I think things are 2D. I have had the smaller and larger thing where I've gone to a common place, so like where my car's parked outside behind the unit. I've walked out one day and I went, my car looks smaller and this grassy area looks bigger than it normally is. And it took me back for a moment because I don't commonly get that, but I have had it happen to me before. Sounds may seem louder or softer than they are. I don't get this. I've never had this and I think it's fascinating, which is not something I should say, but time may seem to be going too slow or too fast. So I've definitely had this. I've had just a misconception of time. So there was a really stressful time where I lost a foster cat and I was very emotional about it, and for about 4 or 5 days I had the emotional detachment. Things felt fake and 2D, and on top of that I also had the time distortion. So I would wake up at like 6 o'clock, go about my day, do things, and it would get to like 4 p.m. in the afternoon and I would think it was still 9 a.m. So for me, the day would go 6 hours too quickly, roughly. But yeah, so those are the symptoms, and I've sort of touched base on some of the symptoms that I've been through and that I've dealt with. Some of them I've never had, and that's why I wanted to talk about them, because every person in this disorder is different and sometimes it's good to know as much as you can about it moving forward. So I would say the first time I realised something was wrong was about 6-7 years ago, and I had my first, and I use quotation marks and I'll explain that in a minute, my first dissociative episode, and I basically fell unconscious and just dissociated from my body and went to a completely different reality, and I don't remember anything that happened, but I was dissociated from my body for about half an hour, and it's the longest I've ever dissociated, and I was screaming and crying and kicking and flailing my arms and hitting my head up against the cupboard, and my boyfriend, who I was living with at the time, was scared and he didn't know what to do. And when I came out of that episode, I hadn't realised what had happened. We sat down and we talked, and he suggested that I go get some help, some real help, and I agreed. I then went to my doctor, told them what had happened. They tried to put me on medication without a diagnosis, without knowing what was wrong with me, and I refused. From my point of view, I thought, how can you medicate something if you don't know what it is? And in the end I was right to do so, because the medication they wanted to put me on would have made things worse. So I then got referred to a psychologist, and they helped me deal with stress day to day and just general coping mechanisms for normal day-to-day life. My episodes dissipated to the point where I didn't have an episode for a year, nearly. And then the year from hell happened. My grandfather passed away. That was a very difficult time for me. To make matters worse, my nan put the day of his funeral on my dad's birthday, so that put a bit of a rift in the family. Not long after that, my boyfriend at the time and I, my boyfriend of 2.5 years, we broke up. It was very amicable, and he is still my best friend. He's one of my subscribers, so thank you. I love you, Ben. But yeah, we broke up amicably. It just didn't work for us. I moved back home with my mum and my dad and my sister. Not long after that, this is all within 1 year, by the way. Not long after that, my dad was forcibly removed from the house by police, and my parents officially separated. It was quite a nasty separation. And not long after that, I lost my job. I was an apprentice chef, and I lost it because the business shut down, and I was devastated. It was probably, I still see it as the worst year of my life. All of these shit things happened, and it caused me so much stress, and I didn't know what to do with myself, and I didn't know where to go. And despite it being one of, you know, the worst times in my life and being the worst year of my life, I met my husband in the middle of all that chaos, and I feel very lucky to have found him at that time. Yeah. It was about a year after Jack and I started dating that I was officially diagnosed. It took a little bit to get to that point. So around, I think it was the night that I lost my job, I had a dissociative episode, a very bad one. In fact, it was a series of them, 3 in a row. And Jack had, like, I told him about this thing that I'd suffered from and warned him, if it ever happens, do this, do that. And it happened, and it was very, very bad. And for me, when I dissociated that time, I went into a warehouse and was being raped and tortured by 3 or 4 men. Yeah. And keep in mind that when I was having dissociative episodes, wherever I went felt completely and utterly real to me. And I still am haunted in a way by these false memories of this particular series of dissociative episodes. And for a long time after that, I had to deal with and try and cope with anxiety to do with men. And there were some days where I couldn't even look at the front door without crying, because I was so terrified of going out and being around people and being near people. And there were even worse times where I was scared of Jack, and my anxiety made it impossible for me to be happy. So in a way, my disorder sort of caused anxiety and further panic attacks after that. You know, after not having an episode for over a year, and then all of this stressful things happening, it sort of just turned it back on again, I guess. And that was probably really hard. It was really hard for me to accept. It was one of the scariest times in my life. And on top of that, I then had to deal with new anxieties. And I then decided that after all this time of doctors not actually testing me for physiological symptoms or anything like that, that I wanted to be properly tested. I'd been told it was either physiological or psychological. So I had an EEG, which basically they put these things on your head, little electrodes, so they can monitor your brainwaves, and then they flash lights in your face and they read your brainwaves, and then a specialised doctor who knows what he's doing reads it, finalises the results, and they send you out a letter. So I waited about 2 weeks to a month, I think, for my letter, and I was praying, hoping for physiological. Because if it's physiological, it means I could just take medication and it would be fine. Unfortunately for me, it was not physiological, it was psychological, and I worried a lot. And I went to my psychologist at the time, and he said that it wasn't really his thing. He didn't know how to properly treat or diagnose any sort of dissociative disorder, and he recommended me to a different clinic, and I went and saw a different psychologist. I sat down with her for a whole session and talked about everything, all my symptoms, all the episodes I'd had, triggers, everything. And she said, let me do my research and I'll talk to you next week in our next session. When I came back from my second session, she had a diagnose. She diagnosed me. Derealisation and depersonalisation disorder. as soon as I had a name, a weight lifted off my shoulders. And since I'd been diagnosed 4 years ago, I've not had a dissociative episode, which is something I'm so proud of. I want to touch on a few key things that really worked for me. I'm not saying they work necessarily for everyone else, but these were key important things to me. So the first and most important thing that helped me learn to cope with my disorder is therapy. Seeing my psychologist, seeing the right psychologist. After I saw the right psychologist, I got diagnosed properly and we were able to move forward with proper therapy and treatment. And she taught me all the coping mechanisms I needed to deal with stress on a day-to-day basis so it didn't all build up and explode and cause episodes like it had in the past. The second thing that is probably one of the most important things next to a psychologist is a support system. Once I had a diagnosis and I knew how to deal with it and how to explain it to people, instead of going, oh, I do this thing where I fall unconscious and scream randomly, that's scary to people. Giving them a name and helping them understand what you're going through helps them support you in your bad times and your bad days. So for me, talking to my family, my friends and Jack and explaining to them what I was going through, and then having them support me through my hard times and my hard days was one of the best things for me. And if you feel like you can't talk to anyone that you know, like your family or your partner or even your friends, there are helplines, websites online, even apps where you can go and chat to people, and I've mentioned them before and they are all in the description. A really important aspect of my disorder is that I can have dissociative episodes and fall unconscious and dissociate from my body, and during those times I felt it necessary to have an action plan. If you work in a dangerous workplace, I think at least one person you work with should know your action plan and should know your disorder and how it functions. If you live with people, they need to know your action plan. So for me, my action plan is get me in a safe spot, away from anything I can bang my head on, because I kick and thrash as well sometimes. Keep me away from sharp things and keep people away from me. The second thing is to, if I'm not moving and I'm breathing, put me in recovery position. Third thing is to time how long I am dissociated for, so how long I'm unconscious, and if it's longer than 5 minutes, call the ambulance, because that's a bad episode for me, is anything longer than 5 minutes. One huge thing that sort of came from talking to my psychologist was meditation. And it's not so much a spiritual thing for me. I don't really see it as like a way to get in touch with the universe or anything like that. For me, it's simply a way to calm my mind, bring my focus back to the here and now and the present, and remove that stress of worrying about the past and the future. That is meditation to me. So one of the coping mechanisms that my psychologist gave me is breathing. Breathing and feeling that breath in the moment and concentrating on it, which is basically all meditation is to me, has been a saving grace. And it sounds so silly that that breathing be a huge thing, but oh my gosh, sitting and breathing and closing your eyes and just concentrating on where the breath is going in your body relieves so much clutter from your brain and it helps calm you down. I want to leave this one last bit of advice that my psychologist gave me, and it is the 5-minute 5-year rule, or mentality rather. So my psychologist said to me, when it comes to worrying and stressing about things, day-to-day things, for example, I used to be a terrible road rager. I used to get very upset. I still do, but a lot less than I used to. So basically, give yourself 5 minutes to release that emotion, get that stress out, get that anger out. But after that, it's not worth your time. I used to like be in a foul mood for hours after that one incident on the road, and I got talking to her about it, my psychologist, and she literally said, is it going to matter in 5 years what that person did to you? I was like, well, no. She goes, well, you don't need to worry about it for more than 5 minutes. And that little bit of advice, that tiny easy little bit of advice, has relieved so much unnecessary anger and stress from my life, and I'm so thankful for it. But yeah, so there a lot of the reasons, the main reasons that I have been able to learn to cope and be as good and as happy and as healthy as I am today. So that's my mental health journey. I'm Kat, and I have DPDR, Depersonalisation and Derealisation disorder, and I am proud of how far I've come, how much I've gone through, and how strong I am coming out the other side of it. And I'm so glad I have the opportunity to share this story with you. So if you're watching this right now and you've watched all the way through the video, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And if you have a mental health journey or a mental health story, please put it in the comments. I wanna know your story. I wanna meet you warriors. As I've mentioned several times in this video, there are links in the description to Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Life in the Apple Store, and I've also left a link to Katie Morton and her YouTube channel. She is a psychologist and she talks a lot about all different aspects of mental health and talks a lot with coping mechanisms and that sort of thing. So if you want to learn more, I definitely recommend going and having a look at her channel. She is fantastic. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!